Hey everyone, you are listening to Incorruptible Massachusetts. We are here to help you understand state politics. So we talk a lot about why it is so broken, what we can have here in Massachusetts if we fixed it, and how you can get involved. And today we have the totally amazing Raul Fernandez, who is running for state rep, and we'll introduce him in just 1 second after we say who we are. So Jordan, why don't you start off with yourself?
My name's Jordan Berg Powers. I use he, him, and I have several years of experience working in progressive politics in Massachusetts, and I live in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Fabulous. I am Anna Callahan, she, her, coming at you from Medford. Ran for state rep, was involved before and after in state politics. Love it. Can't wait for it to change. And now we are ready to introduce Raul Fernandez, current select board member and running for state rep. Raul, tell us a little bit about you and why you're running.
Hey, what's going on? Raul Fernandez here, he, him pronouns. I, for the last few years, have been the select board member, and most recently was a vice chair of the select board, and currently running for state rep out of the 15th Norfolk here in Brookline. Excited to be with you.
Woohoo! Let us know a little bit about why you're running.
Yeah, well, I like many people, I lived in our community and was just sort of enjoying being here, and then started to learn a little bit more about how our politics worked in our community. So I first dipped my toe in the water as a town meeting member, and then made the jump to select board member. And what I've seen from there in the select board is that we're a community that is trying to do some things, some big progressive things in our community, and we certainly can do more. But what we need is a stronger ally at the State House that's going to fight as hard as activists and organizers in Brookline are fighting for climate and environmental justice, for racial and economic justice, for housing affordability and justice. We need a champion at the State House that is going to work hand in hand with organizers to get those things done. I'm running to be that champion.
Fantastic. And of course, you know, we love to diss on the State House here. So I know you guys have been one of the cities that has been sending home rule petitions to the State House. Can you tell us a little bit about the experience that Brookline has had in trying to get policies that your democratically elected leaders are trying to pass?
Yeah, and this is one of those more frustrating things. And I know that there are mayors and city councilors and select board members and town meeting members across the Commonwealth that feel this, that it is difficult enough to get our community on board, to build consensus in our community, to say, yes, we want to do this, to say, as we have in Brookline, that we want to expand voting rights to non-citizens, that we want to expand voting rights to 16 and 17-year-olds in our community, that we want to have a real estate transfer fee so that we can make a very small fee on high-priced home and commercial sales to generate millions of dollars for affordable housing in our community. Those are all things that we as a community at some point or another have agreed that we want to do. And unfortunately, we need the State House to actually allow us to do those things. What's most unfortunate is not that they've been denying our ability to do those things by taking up and down votes and saying we don't think this is a good idea, but more so because our home rule petitions basically sit there ignored, and sessions pass, and then we have to resubmit them all over again, and then they're ignored all over again. That is just not okay. It's disrespectful to local communities, to organizers, to leadership that has done all this work to build consensus in their community, only to have the State House turn away and not even hear the petition from that community. It's disrespectful, it's unacceptable, and that needs to change.
And I mean, to be clear, most of the work that they do are home rule petitions, and yet they still, if it's an alcohol license, they'll easily vote on it. If it's other things, they'll easily vote on it. But things of substance, things where the community has said, this is going to make our community better, and we have gotten to a place where we agree that this is the policy we want to make better, they don't even debate it, to your point, they just ignore it. And people who represent those communities aid and abet the ignoring of them. They aren't on the floor yelling, saying, my town has passed this thing and you should vote on it. They aid and abet ignoring it. they're your elected officials and they are also ignoring it. They're not advocating for it themselves.
Yeah, we had recently the incumbent who's in the seat right now representing our district was advocating against town meeting sending a home rule petition, and instead just wanted town meeting to submit a resolution. Which, I mean, if you think home rule petitions don't get things done, well, then you certainly know resolutions get even less done, right? I mean, and so you know, a home rule petition is for us one of the very few things that can actually make our representative do something, at least actually submit the legislation. If you have a representative who's willing to actually go out there and fight for the things that the community wants, then at least you got a chance. And right now we have a representative that is willing to do the bare minimum and submit what's legally required to be submitted, but who isn't actually out there fighting for the kinds of things that I talked about earlier.
Yeah, and I got to bring up stuff on home rule petitions because in Massachusetts, it just kills me that we have these laws that prevent our elected officials at the local level from passing the laws that their constituents want. Like it is the state house against democracy, and it is really terrible, and it's a crime. And the fact that they refuse to even vote on it is totally absurd. I want to mention one other thing that you said, which is about building consensus. And I love to hear you talk about this. I love it when elected officials talk about this, because being an elected official is not about sitting behind a desk and like reading and writing legislation. Being an elected official is about being in the community and figuring out what people need, especially what marginalized communities need. I mean, we're in skyrocketing inequality right now. There are, like, I was hearing a statistic nationally that 1/4 of families in this country are skipping meals so that their children can eat food. I mean, we are in crazy times now. And building consensus means that as an elected official, you understand the needs of the people who are really being hurt by our system, and that you build that consensus. You are in the community helping people to understand what laws we need to pass, not just sitting around waiting for stuff, let alone seeing home rule petitions come in and actively working against them. So I really love that you talk about building consensus.
Well, thanks. You know, and I'll say, you know, one of the things that's been really important in my work in Brookline, because there really are different Brooklines, right? There's the one that are, you know, that some people live in that is very wealthy and very closed off, and where the folks there don't see what other folks who live in Brookline are living with the food insecurity, with the housing insecurity, with the lack of access to recreation programs and childcare, all of those things. And part of what the work is in here is actually educating people in the community about the needs, and that is part of building that consensus, is getting people to see that those problems exist and that they have a responsibility. And that's probably the harder part of it, is getting them to see and feel that sense of responsibility to do something about it, even if it doesn't impact them personally or directly. You know, that's been part of our work in really getting you know, recentering our budget around people that need it most. Our budget for a long time has had a lot to say about parks and recreation and about public safety, and it should, but it also should have something to say about social services. It also should have something to say about food and housing insecurity. And it doesn't have much at all to say about that. Those are the kinds of things that we're working to change. But likewise, at the state level, you know, we have serious needs in our community that have gone unmet for far too long. And, you know, folks in office are happy to pass some legislation that sounds good, but really isn't impacting people every day on the ground, working people. And the bottom line of it all is families need to know two things. One, they need to know how much they're going to be making going forward, right? They need to be able to estimate in 5 years or in 10 years, I'll be making about this much money. And especially for union workers who go without contracts for however long, years sometimes, it really is unclear how much they're going to be making moving forward, or what they're going to be able to get in the next contract depending on the circumstances of the economy. The other thing they need to know is what their costs are going to be. And having their housing costs in particular, which is the lion's share of where your rent goes, right, or where your check goes, having that be more reasonable and predictable is really critical too. That's rent stabilization. That's making sure that working people who would love to be able to buy a home in Brookline but can't afford to buy one, but are at least for now renting in Brookline, are able to know reasonably and predictably what my rent's going to be a little bit further down the line, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So if I decide to have kids, or if I already do, I can know whether or not they can stay in this school system, until they graduate. Right now, just working people have so little predictability, either about how much is coming in or how much they're going to have to send out the door to be able to take care of themselves and their families. It's not okay, because we're talking about folks who do things that we want and need them to do. If you've been to a restaurant, there is someone working in that restaurant that's not getting paid enough to do the thing that you want and need them to do, either to bring you food or to make you food or to wash the dishes that food was on. And those folks deserve the kind of security that some of the rest of us have. They don't have that right now. That's what we need to be fighting for.
Absolutely. You had mentioned a little bit earlier before we started that Brookline has had to spend a bunch of money out of ARPA funds for stuff for housing costs that really the state is supposed to cover. I'd love for you to talk about that. Yeah,
I mean, and frankly, like, this is, to us is one of those really unbelievable things, is that we have in Brookline federally funded and state funded public housing. Both are underfunded. But the state funded public housing, which is more likely to be family housing, a lot of our federal housing is elderly housing, and that's terrific. But this family housing is really sorely underfunded by the state, such that we had to take $6 million of ARPA money and put it directly toward really basic rehabilitation of public housing, including some safety issues like wiring and things like that, to make sure that everyone that's living there is safe. Never mind updating kitchens and bathrooms that haven't been updated in literally decades, multiple decades. This is the state's responsibility. And by the way, frankly, I had colleagues, as I was fighting for more money for public housing with other organizers and activists, and even some colleagues. I had other colleagues that say, well, this is not our responsibility. It's too bad that the state is supposed to do this. And I agree that the state is supposed to do this, but these are our neighbors. These are our community members. And if it means, coming out of pocket locally to cover something that is someone else's responsibility, we're going to do that. But the state shouldn't get away without hearing from us and understanding, and the community really understanding how badly our representatives have fallen down on the job. Those are representatives. They're the ones that have the control of the purse strings. We're in a place right now where we are awash in cash, so much so that people are calling for us to start, returning some of it and do tax holidays and things like that. This is the time right now to do what we should have been doing all along, and is investing in the people that need it the most. Folks who live in public housing throughout the Commonwealth should absolutely be first on the list for that funding.
I honestly can't square the total crisis we have and the inability of people to afford to live here with the idea that we should give rich people back money. Like, I can't square it. I can't imagine the moral decay.
Jordan, you're not rich enough. If you were richer, you would probably
but
get it.
It's not just being advocated by rich people. I mean, there are journalists who can't afford to live in Brookline who are advocating on their pages, right? They're using their time, their energy. The editors of those pages, they are all a part of copying and pasting without criticism. I mean, there are many things that the governor says that never get covered. The choice to continue to cover the governor and other people's push to give rich people tax breaks is a decision. It's not objective. It's a subjective decision to air the desires of rich people, even as you will literally never benefit from that. Right? Like, there's not a single journalist who copy and pasted those dumb things that the governor says who's going to benefit from the tax cuts that he's putting. Like everybody is complicit with it. And I think it's important. The governor's complicit for sure. The rich people who ask for it are definitely a problem for sure. But there are many choices people are making. And we don't need to, our elected officials should not be thinking about how we can return money back to people who already have so much when there are people struggling to meet their basic needs in the state, as Raul said, like housing, right? We don't have enough. It's not just Brookline. Every community in this state is struggling to house families, right?
And this is, you know, Jordan, this is part of the reason why I think we need such greater representation of diverse voices, perspectives, and experiences in the State House, because, you know, it is, I have an implicit understanding, somebody who grew up in public housing, somebody who has been food insecure, somebody who has been a renter and has not known whether or not come, you know, the first of the month, whether or not I'd be able to afford to pay that rent, somebody that's been priced out of where I lived in the past. All those things, like an implicit understanding of how messed up our system is right now and how it doesn't work for people who do exactly what they're told they're supposed to do, which is get out there and work, right? And even when people are doing that thing that they're told they're supposed to do, they're not able to provide for themselves and their families, right? There is no difference between, you know, working people who work in an office and working people who, I don't know, work somewhere outside or work in the service industry. They are working as hard, and by the way, even harder than other folks, doing something that is absolutely essential for our society and the way that we've constructed it. They're doing all the things they're supposed to do, and they still cannot. They're not secure, and they're not sure that they're going to be able to take care of themselves and their families. That is, you know, if we can't right that wrong, something that is so simple and so fixable today, by the way, by reallocating resources, by making sure that the wealthy people are going to be just fine when even after the Fair Share Amendment passes. Wealthy people are just going to be just fine even after we pass the real estate transfer fee. And it is amazing that we can levy these very small fees on people that make so much, and it produces so much for the people that need it the most. If we can't do that, what is the point of having a Democratic supermajority in the State House? What is the point of it if we cannot take care of the people who need it the most? It is beyond me. It's infuriating. It's maddening, frankly, that we have Democrats that don't get this right now. Part of that, I think, is because not enough of them have the lived experience to really understand what it is that you and I are talking about right now, to actually understand these problems, to know in a deep and personal way how they impact people, and to know how urgently this needs a fix. That's the only thing that I can wrap my mind around to understand why these Democrats, who, including some who voted for a Democratic platform, which includes prioritizing the people that need it most, which includes racial and economic justice, which includes all of these really good words, that we're not able to pass legislation that matches it at the State House.
Yeah, it's funny. We were at the Democratic state convention, and one of the things we were handing out flyers, we're like, yeah, we're just trying to elect people who are going to pass the Democratic Party platform. That's all. It's really a low bar. That's all we're trying to do, you know. And Raul, I want to talk about something that is so near and dear to my heart. You talk a lot about lived experience, and you, of course, have your own lived experience, but you also do something that at Incorruptible Mass and at the Incorruptibles, we specifically train people in, and we encourage every elected official to do, and that is to have a kitchen table of people in your own community who come from a variety of different marginalized communities and different underserved communities, as well as some policy experts. But this is something that you were already doing before we even ever talked to you, and is so exciting. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about your kitchen table and how you put it together, and really what you get out of it, how it helps you to be a better elected official.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, I'll say, you know, for us and for me in particular, it's been really important from the beginning that we build, because we have in our organizing circles a multiracial, multi-generational, multi-experiential campaign. And that voices that are so often left out of our governance are represented in our campaign and represented in our policymaking. So a couple of things. We have this really open, expanded kitchen table. And I always tell people there's a seat for you at the table. Like, we want you to be part of it. So it's not a super exclusive core group of people that are just guiding the campaign and that's it. We welcome all kinds of voices, and we've made expanded tables to make sure that we have folks, for instance, who live in public housing that are well represented. We have young people in our community that are well represented. Educators are well represented as well, and other groups too. We want to make sure that that as we roll out our policy papers, and we have a number of them on our website, we've had public policy conversations around racial and economic justice, around climate justice, around affordable housing, and other issues as well, education, et cetera. We want to make sure that those voices are represented. So we've had these sessions where we'll have a few people that either through personal experience or expertise have something meaningful to say about education or racial justice, for instance, or the intersection thereof. And that is helping us flesh out our policy positions as a campaign. And so my commitment to those folks is, A, we're going to build policy that is actually going to improve their lives in a directly meaningful and tangible way so that they will feel the impact of those policies. And that, B, once we're elected into office, this table and these expanded tables aren't going away. They're going to be part of our office that helps make sure that we're filing the right legislation, that we're supporting the right legislation, and importantly, holding us accountable for doing everything we said we would do during the campaign. I say this all the time, and we're in the middle of doing all these endorsement interviews, including with unions and some really other great organizations. And I tell the folks there this all the time. People, when they're running for office, will come here. They know exactly what you want to hear, and they're going to tell you what you want to hear. Then they're going to get elected to office, and they're not going to do half of it. When I first ran for select board, people, I said, this is what I'm about, and this is what I'm going to do. And people were naturally skeptical because they'd heard that before from other people. And what I said was, just witness. You'll see, because I'm not, I'm here for the actual meaningful, tangible change that people can feel. And that's what I'm going to fight for. And even if we don't get it, you're going to at least know that I'm fighting for it. And that's exactly what I did in the 3 years I was on the select board. That's exactly what I'm going to do as a state rep. But what we need to do is make sure that we create accountability mechanisms, and that we invite people to hold us accountable for doing what we said we were going to do. We can't necessarily in a state house of so many representatives be responsible, or commit to getting legislation passed. But we can damn sure commit to fighting for that legislation and make sure that we are in there, that we're in the conversations, that we're helping to make whatever legislation does get passed more meaningful, more tangible, more impactful. But you got to have organizers and activists, over your shoulder, in your ear, making sure that they're keeping you as honest as possible. And we've set that up in our campaign, and we're going to keep that going after we get elected.
Totally amazing. So I'm going to throw in a little a thing here because I would love for us to talk just for a minute about the news that came out today. I'm going to try and get this published today about the Uber Lyft ballot question. I just seen some things on Twitter that it apparently is not going to be on the ballot. This is amazing.
It got kicked off the ballot.
Yes.
And the reason it got kicked off the ballot is they were trying to hide a bunch of things in it. And the SGC specifically noted that they were, among the things they were doing was that they were hiding liability. So nominally what they were saying in this debate about is letting people keep independence, which is of course not what it was about. It was about a lot of things, but mostly it was them trying to skirt the law. And buried in, not only were they trying to skirt the law in terms of oversight over their business, but they also, additionally, in the thing, were trying to hold, they were saying that anything that happens in Uber, even if they knew that they were doing things like hiring people who are illegal or hiring people who had repeatedly sort of broken the law when driving for Uber and Lyft, that even if those things happen, they're not liable. Uber Lyft isn't liable for injuries that happen. So they were trying to protect themselves, their corporations, from liability for the errors that they were knowingly doing to save money and to make money. And so the SGC said, not only is this thing beyond what voters should be able to do on a ballot, but also you're trying to bury important information that voters may actually want to have a say over. And so you can't have one ballot question that does all of these things. And that's essentially what they said. I agree with them. I think, there is certainly, if 4 years ago they could kick off the ballot, the millionaire's tax, for dubious reasons, trying to cover up liability in a totally other thing, which is already complex, around the way in which Massachusetts is supposed to oversee their industry, is definitely a violation of that. And to its credit, the SGC stuck to its precedent in the last case and said, nope, this is too bonkers. We have to. So
this is the problem. It's always been the problem with corporations write their own legislation. They're not writing it for people. They're writing it for their own benefit. And this idea that it was about flexibility for workers or those kinds of things, that is not what this is about. They did not pour millions of dollars into this and do the same thing out in California and elsewhere because they wanted to provide more flexibility for their workers. This is about profit, pure and simple, and shielding themselves from liability, as you said, Jordan. This is why we cannot have corporations having such a big seat at the table. This is part of the problem with money in politics as well. And not just everyday people. They need the seat at the table, not these corporations, and they certainly don't need to be able to bypass the legislature and just try to ram something through it as a ballot measure. So I'm glad the SJC came through for us this time.
Yep. And I'll just say really quickly for people who are listening, who are trying to understand these things, the easiest thing you need to hear is if somebody tells you that the way to keep things the same is to vote yes, it's usually a lie, right? Like by definition, a ballot initiative is to change the law. So if the law is, if the thing you're trying to do is keep it the same, then why do you need to change the law? Right? That doesn't make any sense, right? Sometimes it's the case. I'm not gonna say it's never the case, but sometimes it's the case. But you should interrogate that logic, right? There should be a plausible thing that they should be trying to tell us, to say that we need to keep flexibility, so we need to change the law to keep flexibility, right? That was always a lie. It was always about other things.
And also I have to giggle a little bit gleefully at how many millions of dollars they already spent in this state, because I heard commercial after commercial. These were slick. They were really well done commercials, painting them as like the little guys protecting the workers, and it was just unbelievable. And I don't know how many millions of dollars they spent, but sadly though, that money went to like these ad agencies or whatever, and not into anything good. But at least it didn't go toward ruining our laws here.
Right. We had a resolution in our town meeting that just wrapped up last week around this issue and essentially supporting, against the ballot measure. And they sent like glossy cards, like fold over cards to households in Brookline saying oppose this resolution. I mean, they were spending money and even going so far as to like just within our own community to try to make the case here. Thankfully, town meeting saw right through that BS, and thankfully so did the SJC.
Wow. Well, this has been such a fantastic conversation, Raul. Great to have you on. Love to see the work that you're doing already, and excited to see the work that you will do at the State House.
Well, yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you, and thank you for all your support.
Wonderful. Talk to you soon. See everybody next week.